All right, welcome back. So in this video, we're going to go over some of the most commonly used Git commands. And so there's a cheat sheet that I'm going to point you to here where you can actually go ahead and download, or you can just view the PDF within the browser. So what I want to do is cover this third bullet point here, commonly used Git commands, and I want to walk through the Git workflow. And in the next video, we'll go through Git, basically branching with Git, and I'll talk about some of the use cases for branching, and then how to update and share our code to a remote repository. All right, so let's go ahead and skip to those slides here that talks about some of the most commonly used Git commands. So here, you can go ahead and right click on this button here and open a new tab. And this is a quick cheat sheet that will get you acclimated to some of the different commands and how to successfully version control your projects. And what I want to do here in this video is go over primarily this stage and snapshot area here. And so we're going to talk about Git Status, Git Add, Git Reset, Git Diff, what's the changes between the various stages when you're version controlling, and then how to make a commit. We'll also go over Git Log, and Git Log is where it'll show all the various commits that you've made to your project. Going back to the slideshow here, if you click on this link here and open a new tab, this is a more exhaustive documentation regarding some of the different commands you can run within Git. So I would invite you to take a look at this website and get some of that get a little more information about Git. But for our purposes here, what we would need here is just to really dive into running these various commands that we see on this PDF document here. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with running some of these commands that we have highlighted here on this PDF document. What I'm going to do is open up a Git terminal, and I'll begin to basically version control a folder. And that's the first step, is really figuring out what do you want to version control. And typically if you're doing like a web project or a web application, they're both one and the same, right? So if you're doing a web project or a web application, you want to version control everything within that project folder. And so the first thing you want to do when you create a web project is to create a folder. And I would say the second thing you want to do is you want to ignite Git into that folder. So what I'm going to do is minimize my screen here. I already have a folder that I created. It's called test app, and then in this folder here it has a folder called JS review or JavaScript review, and I have one file here called test. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up this JS_review folder within my editor. So I'm going to go here to Visual Studio Code, click on open folder, and I'll go to test app, and then I'll go to JS_review and hit select folder. And so that folder is now open within my editor, and I have a test.js file, and I just have a simple function here that I define, and I'm going to call that function. Now, like I said, the focus is not necessarily on JavaScript, but it's going to be on version control and how to successfully do that. So let's say, for instance, I'm starting off with a simple web project, and I just have one function at this moment. But what if I wanted to keep track of all the changes I've made to this test.js file? And that's where version control comes in. So what I'm going to do here is I'm in the JS review file. I'm going to bring up my terminal in Visual Studio Code. That's Control tilde. And what I'm going to do, because I've downloaded Git, I can go ahead and select the Git Bash Terminal. So I'm going to say select default shell, and I'm going to get the Git Bash Terminal. And so I've selected that, but now I'm going to hit this plus sign, and now you'll see that I have a Bash Terminal open I have a Bash Terminal open. I'm already in the folder that I want to version control. So JS_review is the folder that I want to keep track of all the various files within that folder. And so the first thing I'm going to do is a command called git init. So GIT INIT. What that does is it initializes Git into the JS_review folder. Just to prove that that folder has been initialized, if you go and open up that folder And let's go ahead and click on Git. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to expose all the hidden files. So I'll say View, and then here Hidden Items. And you'll see that when I ran the command git init, it put a little bitty folder in there, .git. And what that does here, this folder here, is going to keep track of all the changes. So if you ever want to remove Git from your project folder or from your application, all you have to do is simply just delete the .git folder. All right, so that's the very first command. When you want to initialize Git, run git init. Whenever you want to initialize Git into a project folder, run git init. Whenever you want to initialize Git into a project folder, run git init. So the next thing I want to do here is I've already configured my name, my terminal in terms of who's going to be making a commit. What I want to do is make my first initial commit. First, I want to make sure that all my files are saved. And what I'm going to do here is say git add. And if I want to, I can add just a file, say test.js, or I can add everything within my project folder. And if I want to add everything within my project folder, I can just simply do git add and then make sure you do a space and then do a dot. And what that's going to do is add everything. It's going to begin to track the various changes for everything that's within that project folder. So if I say git add period, right, that's going to now put that to the staging area. And we'll talk about the different areas that the files travel to actually get to an official commit. But just watch and observe here, and then we'll talk about what is happening here behind the scenes. The next thing I want to do, if I want to actually make a timestamp or say I want to give it a message in terms of what changes I've made to the file, you will run a command called git commit -m, stands for message, and you'll say, in this case here, I'm just going to say initial commit because this is the first time that I've initialized Git into this project folder. And at this point I can say hit enter, and that made a commit, and it basically lets me let anybody know who actually works with this project folder that this is the date and the time that somebody initialized Git into this project folder. So if I want to say Git Status, there's another command here. It's going to let me know that my branch is clean. There's no files that need to be updated or committed. But then watch this. If I want to Git Log, that's going to show me all the changes that somebody has made to this project folder. And you'll see that when I made a Git commit, it put a timestamp, also the author and the email address of who actually made that change to that file. So that's the initial kind of workflow of Git. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about what is really happening behind the scenes here. And so a couple commands that we went over here, we went over git init, which is basically initializing Git into the project folder or keeping track of the changes. We went over git add. We can add a single file, or we can add everything within a project folder. Typically going to add everything in a project folder by saying git add period. And then we made the official commit. This actually puts a timestamp and also notates what change happened to that, to those files within that, what files changed, and you giving a comment on the change you made to those files. The other command we did here was a git status, and this lets you know what stage the particular files are in. And the last one here is Git Log, and it shows a history of all the various commits. Let's jump back to the slideshow and let's talk a little bit about the workflow. So this is what I did here on the local. So only focus on this particular part here where it says local. And so our working directory is just basically our files within our project folder. And we initialize Git by saying git init. But then there's kind of three buckets. If you see here, there's a working directory, there's our staging area, and then there's our local repository. And so to basically get our files to the staging area, I ran a command called git add, and that added my files to the staging area. And the staging area is just an area where you're working with the files, you're making the changes and making the adjustments, but you're not yet ready to make the official commit or put a timestamp on what change you've made to that project folder. And so you can work with those files until you're actually ready to make a timestamp. And then when you're ready to make a timestamp, you're going to say git commit -m and then add a message to notate the change you made to that project. There's a few other commands that we're going to go through: git checkout, git merge, git push, git pull. But nonetheless, I just want to focus on the forward moving of the local. So the git add, git commit, and then there's the git log that shows all the commits, and then the git status will show you which stage your files are currently located within. So is it in a working directory, is it in a staging area, or is it a file that's been, or is your project up to date in terms of being all committed? Let me run through this one more time here, and then I'll end this video, and then we'll get into some of the other commands here. So one more time, I'm going to make a quick change here and say the meeting time, instead of 2 p.m., I'm going to say it's 4 p.m. and I'm going to save that. So now when I run a git status, remember, you're going to become accustomed to running git status, because git status lets you know where your files exist, right? Whether it's going to be in a working directory, the staging area, or if it's a file that's, or if it's committed within a local repository. So here I go back, and if I say git status, you'll see that changes not staged for commit, and it's going to be test.js, because I changed the meeting time variable to 4 p.m. And so now if I run if I go into add test.js, so git add to the staging area, period, or I can just only add that file because I only changed one file, git add test.js. If I run a git status, you'll see that now these changes are changes to be committed is test.js. So that's now within the staging area. At this point here, I can go make a change and say, and then just kind of notate what change I made. So I'll say git commit -m, changing the meeting time variable to 4 p.m. and test.js. Right, and so now I'm letting everybody know, whoever comes and review this application, they'll know that I made a change to the meeting time. And if somebody were on my team, they can just do a git log, and it would let them know that the first initial commit was done on August 31st by C. Fulton, and then another commit, another change to this file was that the author here, C. Fulton, changed the meeting time variable to 4 p.m. in test.js. And really that's the essence of version control, right? We want to basically keep track of all the changes to our file, and it lets others know what has been the history of this project, and that's kind of the workflow that we're gonna get used to and get accustomed to. All right, so practice those commands, make some changes, add some new files, run git status to see where your files are located, and then become very familiar with those commands we just went over, and we're going to go over some more in the next video.